let's make another great, successful, memorable day today. And with this, I'd like to welcome our star-studded cast to celebrate the life of Asma Jahangir. I'd like to request Lyse Doucet to kindly come to stage, along with Ahmed, Rashid, Salima, Hashmi, Munizae Jahangir, Jilani Jahangir, and the inimitable Rehman Sahib.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Kya haal hai? The Lahore Literary Festival is about the power of our stories. It is about the power of our words. And this morning, we have two words. Asma. Asma Jahangir. And we have all the words that have whirled through all our lives, all over the world. Advocate, angel, icon, warrior icon, fighter, fearless fighter, friend, and family. And there's another, well, a rude F word that we must have all used in these days at our disbelief and injustice that Asma Jahangir was taken from us too soon, far too soon. And so today, gentle people of Lahore and beyond, today is a day to share our stories. The stories of Rehman and the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan and decades of defending those who were defenseless. The stories of Salima Hashmi, of children growing up in dictatorship, of the women's movement, about the ambitions for art and for a different kind of Pakistan. The stories of Ahmed, Rashid, and myself, Lyse Doucet, are the stories of speaking out, of courage and conviction. For Jilani and Munizae, stories of an entire lifetime lived, of love and of laughter. Because Asma Jahangir understood most of all that a wicked, wonderful sense of fun was one of the most cherished human rights of all. Rehman, did you really not even look up when Asma suggested to you that you established the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan? Tell us about your story.
This is a story that has been repeated off and on. You see, I was working in viewpoint and used to write all kinds of nonsense, which Asma said was wasting time. So I remember in my room, she is standing in the doorway, looking up. And just he turns to me and says, "Come on, sir, let us set up a Human Rights Commission." So I continued writing. I said, "Okay, let's do that." And very often she cited me with this thing, that I was making a very serious proposal, and he was busy writing, all kinds of stupid things. But she must have considered other people also. Ahmed and there were others. So she did that.
And all those, how many times she must have dragged you or you dragged her out to the streets to Well, you can't count the times. The times you dragged you out to the streets, or you dragged her, or you dragged each other.
People have a view of Asma Jahangir that she was always throwing spanners in works. But she did a lot of constructive work. Let me tell you. In 1984, Supreme Court gave judgment on bonded labor, abolished bonded labor. And in that case, Asma Jahangir was the amicus curiae, and she was asked by the Chief Justice to conduct a survey of bonded labor in Pakistan, Lahore, and it was on her report that the Supreme Court gave the judgment that bonded labor is abolished. Then, we started working in bonded labor in Sindh, and we realized that there was no law to take care of people who violated it. So Asma led the team which prepared the draft of the Bonded Labor System Abolition Act, which was given to then our friend Senator Sayyid Akbar Haider. He moved it as a private member's bill in the Parliament, and it was adopted. So Bonded Labor System Abolition Act was originally to Asma. Then she was consulted on juvenile justice law, and she contributed to the juvenile justice ordinance. And there was a problem, that she did not want to deny her advice to the government, but she didn't want to be too close to the government for comfort. So in 1996, when we had the law minister, interim law minister, Justice S.A. Salam, very nice man, and they proposed to set up a Human Rights Commission national. And they invited the rapporteur and Asma Jahangir both to be on it. So they simply inquired, where will this commission be located? And the answer was in the Interior Ministry. So we all thought it was a huge joke. Setting up a Human Rights Commission in the police department. So both of them said, sorry, you can't be. On another occasion also, when General Musharraf took over, and he had no theme to exploit, so he went for NGOs and things like that, enlightenment and all that. So he invited Asma to attend the convention that was holding on human rights. And she asked me to do the topic. I said, what are we supposed to do there? Are we allowed to speak? So the answer given to us was, no, listen. So Asma said, we have better people to listen to. So forget about that. Finally, when the government decided to have this National Human Rights Commission, and the minister in charge, incidentally, was Rehman. So he invited all of us, Asma, as well as myself too, and we discussed that we are not denying you the benefit of our experience. So if you find in that law something which is creditable, you can write it down to Asma Jahangir. The point is that whatever the circumstances and whatever will be happening, but then what was the state's reward? Pakistan set an example by complaining against her to the United Nations when she was special rapporteur. Countries honor their special rapporteurs because they are representing their country and all. But this was one case in which the Honorable Government of Pakistan thought it proper to complain this country pays special rapporteur. That's something.
Let us go back to the beginning which forged the kind of determination and the conviction of a young woman who fought and succeeded in changing some of the laws which emerged from dictatorship. Salima Hashmi, remember those days when you were just this high and your ambitions this big?
Well, interestingly, when I first met Asma, and I don't remember it at all, she was a little girl. There was a difference of almost 10 years between us. I have really the military dictator of Ziaul Haq to thank for our friendship. Because it was during those years when we were, our street fighting years, as it were, against the dictatorship, and we followed those who really led the way, which included people like Tahira Mazhar, my mother, and so on, these older ladies. But I think Asma's story goes right back to her nurturing during her father's fight against the first army dictator, Ayub Khan. And I think in that she found the kind of awareness that was happening in the 60s in families across Pakistan, and we shouldn't forget that this was a time when there was another wing to this country, and they were the people who were most vociferous in the way that they fought for their rights. And Asma's family was very much in the heart of it. So in a sense, that is how she was nurtured. And our friendship started during the not so lamented late General Ziaul Haq's period. I'm saying this because I find there's a lot of airbrushing going on these days, even of that general. So that worries me. And so that is how and we had a bond because we had this strong emotional tie to the times when our fathers were incarcerated. So it was something that drew us close to one another. People often sort of heard detractors often say, or even people say, Asma was far too idealistic. She was fighting for the perfect utopian society, which is not possible. And I disagree with that, because I think she was able to, certainly she saw the bigger picture, but she was able to see its manifestations in smaller things which were worth fighting for. And therefore, she would draw us in with her and point out, that is where we need to pay attention. That is what we need to do. And always with a great optimism, but a great insightfulness and tremendous sense of humor, an impish sense of humor, which saw us through some very difficult times. And people have a whole host of stories which reflect the fact that in the worst of times, and we saw many of them together, she was able to see the ridiculousness of Pakistan and the silliness and the pomposity which goes with affairs of the state, and how she was able to see that and take it down. And I agree with Rehman Saab that, she was always willing to give the government the benefit of her knowledge and her expertise, but she also knew where to draw the line. And she was not seduced by the niceties that can occur when you are part of the system. And she always bucked the system while saying that, law and order was based on certain frameworks. I also had the privilege of being part of the extended family, in the sense she took, all her friends will tell you, how intensely interested she was in their children. And when Yasir, my son, was going off to study at McGill, and her daughters also, she said, he should be the uncle over there. He should make sure that they don't overstep the rules that I set down. And one of my sort of best stories is, she was worried that Yasir was not finding the right girl and not getting married. And she kept, harassing him and said, Yasir, it's time that you got married. It's time, Yasir, you'll get too old, you're nearing 40, you have to do this. And he would always brush her off. And one day he said to her, Asma Khala, can I at least fall in love? So she said, okay, but within 2 months.
And Simi, you remind us that Asma wore many hats. She was most of all a daughter of Pakistan. She was a lawyer, but she was also very much a Pakistani woman. And she's now being quoted in many places saying that the words women's rights didn't exist before, that in some ways they seem to be an oxymoron for many people, but now it's part of the language and part of the fight. And you would have been very much part of those formative years when women came together and were the bravest of the brave. All due respect, I Sorry.
I think certainly the profiling of this idea became very sharp, especially during the Zia years, of course, because the targeting of women, women's rights, minority rights, peasants' rights, the rights of the underprivileged became acute during that period. And because of Asma's championing, in very practical ways, I think it became part of general awareness that there was something which you would call Aurton ke Hakook. It's not that the generation before that didn't fight for it, but I think Asma's particular talents, which were being extremely rooted, having the ability to articulate in a kind of way that was easily understood across Pakistan. I mean, she had the ability for repartee and also for pointing out certain things in such a very often dramatic manner. And I used to sometimes sort of say to her, you know, it's all right, you know, cool it. You don't have to be so violent in your rhetoric. But she would say, no, it's required. And I think that is the period, especially, you know, in the 80s, when things became very sharp. The contradictions became extremely sharp. And certainly Asma's role is something that is now there forever. I was at a students' convention last week, and there was a young man, a schoolboy, and the girl in the team, the debating team, mentioned Asma. And he looked a little bit befuddled. And he said, yes, she worked for the women and children of Pakistan. He was obviously from a very privileged background. And I thought, okay, if the message has gone there, you know, it's okay. You know, Asma did it.
Thank you. Last night, when I was at Ahmed Rashid's home with Angie, I went and sat down with Angie, and she looked at me and she said, you're sitting where Asma used to sit, the sofa along the edge of the wall. And both of us stopped for a moment to think about Asma sitting there, and reminded me how I would usually sit with Asma somewhere else, that in the gatherings, the dinners, the evenings, the weddings that came and went through Ahmed and Angie's house, every time I arrived, Asma would pull me aside away from the crowds and the din, and we'd sit on a bench right along the wall in a quiet corner, where she, with her clarity and conviction and compassion, would try to fill me in on everything and everyone, what was happening in Pakistan. And Ahmed Rashid, of course, lived those years upon years with Asma Jahangir, coming in and out of his door and on and off of his phone. And Ahmed, tell us about your life with Asma.
Well, there's so many aspects of her life. I mean, the first thing I just want to remind everyone that she took up, there's no other human being in Pakistan's history who has taken up so many causes of people. I mean, Christians, blasphemy, the Baloch, the Pashtuns, the landless peasants, I mean, climate change, you name it, and she took up the cause. If you had a cause and you'd go to her. If you had a cause and you went to her and she thought this was legitimate, she would wield it into her whole political, legal presentation. And so, I mean, that was the first aspect of her. Second was, you know, whenever there was a political crisis, the first person I had to contact was Asma. And as you know, we lived through multiple political crises. And she would always say to me, not on the phone, come and we have to meet. So we would meet and we would discuss the political situation. And I was always stunned because she had all sorts of insights, she had knowledge and information that I didn't have. Because there were so many people in the establishment who admired her and really were wanting to work with her, they would leak information to her. So she was one of the most astute and clued up people that you could possibly have. And then thirdly, we should remember the international figure that she cut. I mean, she was a UN rapporteur in half a dozen countries, a UN rapporteur for human rights. And I mean, there were very few Pakistanis around, and so was her sister, Jilani. There were very few people around in Pakistan who had the credibility to become international rapporteurs for an organization like the United Nations. And it was incredible. I mean, we were incredibly proud of her, simply because, she would go off on these missions and all sorts of stories would come back. And of course, there was so much danger in her life, constantly. She was threatened. I was one of the first people she would inform, and she would ask me to come over and analyze and see who has threatened her now. Is it a group here? Is it a group there? Is it one of the intelligence agencies? Where has this threat come from? And she lived under this constant threat. Half of the threat she never told her family. She never told her children. She never told even her husband, TJ. And she just lived with it. Finally, everything that she's done, I have to tell you this one story. I wrote a book many years ago called Taliban, and the ISI banned it. And it was not selling. It was doing very well abroad. It was not selling in Pakistan. And she read it. And she came to me and said, this is the most fantastic book. Every Pakistani has to read it. I said, the ISI banned it and the bookshops are not willing to sell it. And, there are only about a few hundred copies are out there. She said, we have to change this. So she came, about 2 days later, she came back. She said, I've got the perfect answer. We're going to award you a prize for writing this book. And the prize is called the Nisar Usmani Prize for Courage, after one of Pakistan's leading journalists. So I said, Asma, for God's sake, there's no such prize. No, there is. I've dug it up. It's an old human rights prize that has not been given for many years. And by the way, there's a 100,000 rupee award that goes with the prize. So I said, Asma, you come on. I mean, so we had the ceremony, and we all, gave speeches, and it was all in the newspapers, and the ban was lifted. And the book started selling in Pakistan. So about 3 days, then I realized what had happened. I went to Asma. I said, Asma, tell me honestly, there is no such prize, is there? She said, no, there is no such prize. I made it up, And I said, where did the money come from? She said, the money came from my pocket, of course. Which, of course, we immediately gave back. I mean, these kinds of things that she would do for people, which were just extraordinary. And, not for me, but I know so many stories of poor people. People like landless peasants, people who'd lost their jobs, people who had been beaten, who'd been tortured, who were in jail, and of course the whole blasphemy episode. She was an indisputable giant of Pakistan's history, Pakistan's life, and we will never forget her. Thank you.
And Ahmed, I'm sorry that I have to reveal this to everyone, but of course I work for the BBC and we should always tell the truth. And the fact of the matter is, if I don't give this role to you, I'd have to give it to Rehman Saab, and that might be much more difficult. But could you please tell us about your new role as the new head of the Cobra Dancing Club?
Well, in the evening, she used to love company. I don't think there was ever an evening that she used to sit alone. And if she was sitting alone, she'd immediately call half a dozen friends, and at the end of the evening, she would do the Cobra dance, which was this, this. And she would see us out of the house at 2 o'clock in the morning, having performed the Cobra dance.
And there'll be a special LLF session, unscheduled, if you would like to learn Cobra dancing at the end of the day. Of all the roles that Asma played, the most important and the one she loved the most was being a mother. And a mother to children that all of us here can say, certainly her dear friends, children of whom she was very proud. She gave them a hard time, tough love, but that's the job of mothers. But she also did it with all of the charisma and care that we all know Asma for. And I'm going to look way down the end of the line to someone who I consider to be my colleague and dear friend, someone who I've admired for years and known so long, Munizae, at the very end. And I told Munizae last night that when I see her on Pakistan television, when I see her in her work, I think of Munizae most of all, but I also think of Asma and the spirit of Asma.
Well, I don't know where to begin. I think this stage I have known for a very long time. I was 5 when I performed on this very stage. I'm a Kathak dancer.
Oh.
And my mother introduced me when I was 5 to Maharaj Ghulam Hussain Kathak. It was the Zia years at that time. And dancing was pretty much banned. But my mother saw I was a very naughty child, so she wanted to keep me occupied in various things. So there was not a moment for me to be naughty. Therefore, I learned how to do horse riding, do Kathak, sing songs, and she opened up a whole world for me. I met people like all of you sitting on this stage, which I would have never met. And I think that she was a very sensitive mother. She noticed our capabilities, our interests, and she would try her best to develop them and to build relationships with people and maintain relationships with people who she thought could guide us. I don't know whether you all remember Maharaj Ghulam Hussain Kathak. At that time he used to wear a long robe, and he was a Kathak dancer with long hair and had a commanding presence. And for many years he became a part of the family. She was the one who introduced me to him, and I think that was the beginning of my exploring the art world, which she really encouraged me to do. And I remember one of those evenings where there would be very few evenings where there would be nobody. But when there would be nobody, she would, busy herself in trying to convince me to write a film script, a romantic comedy that we were actually thinking of. And she used to always say to me that dreams are to be enjoyed also. It's not necessary that you realize them. Then many years later, she was at that time defending a 14-year-old boy, Salamat Masi, who was wrongly accused of blasphemy. There was an attack on our house, and because again I was very naughty, I had to be sent away to boarding school, so she realized that if I'm not allowed to go out of the house, that would kill me. And I went to a boarding school in England. So when she went to leave me, she got me everything that I wanted and set up my whole room. And then she left at night. And I was very upset. I was very young, and I cried and I went to bed. And the next morning she said, "Why did you go to bed at 10 p.m.? I thought you were going to go to bed at 9:30. And my brother used to always say that, beware of her. She has her spies everywhere, and she can see you when you don't even know." And I was astounded, and I said, "How do you know that I went to bed?" She said, "Well, you turned off your light at that time." And then and she kept me, guessing why, how did she know? There was a little lane in front of the boarding school, and she would stand there till I actually switched off my light to see what time I had gone to bed. When I started my TV program, she used to watch each and every TV program. And in the middle of a live TV program, I would be getting this feed from her, keep your hair back, concentrate on what you're saying rather than how you're looking. Please don't cut that person short, allow him time, And often she would tell my producer, why don't you do, shows on social issues? And he would keep saying, our ratings have just come up, you want them to crash again? And then she would sit down with me and devise ways of how public can be interested in social issues. She was the one who took me to Balochistan and introduced me to the insurgency that was happening there, and I remember we were shot at. And I obviously, pulled out my camera while they were shooting just to being a typical journalist. And my mother actually sat on my neck. And it was Musharraf's era at that time. And we went back to this one safe house that the army had at the time. And once we got there, they had a DCO. His name was Abdul Samad Lasi. And a lot of people told us that he had been waiting for us there, waiting for us, so when we'd approach, they'd shoot at us. So when we arrived, and he arrived within 15 minutes, although he claimed he was half an hour away, he said, I'm very sorry, you're like my sister to my mother. And, if something had happened to you, I would have, not been able to forgive myself. So my mother said, okay, so why don't you lodge an FIR? So he took out the FIR and he said, whose name should I put on? And she said, put your name first. So, and I was just shocked that she could say these things to these people. And she said, let's go and find the bullet casings. And he said, no, we'll look after, we'll do the forensics. And she said, well, you won't, because by tomorrow morning you would have cleared everything. So that night she said, we will stay with you because we've seen your hospitality. And then tomorrow night, we will stay with the Baloch. And he actually stayed that night at the guest house with us. And I went into the room and I said, this is something else. We are really sleeping in the same house as the murderers, But I feel that was my mother. She lived life so intensely. And she celebrated life. Rehman Saab said something very beautiful last night, that there is no need to mourn her life. There is only a need to celebrate her life. Because in her life, she celebrated all of us. She celebrated what was there to be celebrated about Pakistan. She believed in the courage of the people of Pakistan. She believed that people were not, that the state was not living up to the expectations of the people, and she believed that people could pull each other up despite the state. And I think that's why so many people were driven to her, because she empathized with them and she understood their problems and their challenges.
Munizae, thank you. Do you want to also another moment for us to share in her wonderful sense of laughter about the Valentine's Day?
Yes. I think, so she loved her Twitter account. She couldn't, like every other mother, she couldn't handle technology at all. She used to call it Twitters, that I twittered this today. And I would say, you say, and sometimes she would say things and I would run to her and I'd be like, what have you said? And she said, whatever, I've said it now. But I remember it was Valentine's Day and she was on her Twitter handle. And she said at that time, Basant had just recently been banned. So she said, ban Basant, ban all the ceremonies that we can enjoy and we can just look forward to the next blast. So she used to have tons of trolls, tons, it never bothered her. And he trolled her and he said, may I have your daughter's number so that I can wish her Valentine's? And she tweeted back immediately and said, well, wish me first.
A big heart. Valentine, never mind Valentine's Day, 365 days of the year, a big heart for Asma. Jilani, growing up in a house dominated by women, never mind the dictatorship and the patriarchy of Pakistan, what about the matriarchy? And you had to be the great Jahangir in the house and the rock of the family.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone talks about all the work she did, and for me, obviously I saw it as a young boy, and of course 2 weeks from today, when I was at the hospital, and this fighter that we know as Asma Jahangir was unable to fight for her own life. Just like any other child, I felt orphaned, helpless, as if the ground beneath my feet had been snatched away. But it wasn't until later that day and the next few days that followed when I really started to see the thousands of people who started pouring in from all sects of society, from all corners of Pakistan, I truly understood what her legacy was all about. And I think that it was the kind of stand that she gave to people, and the way that she helped people to realize how they could stand united for justice and just put their differences aside and celebrate their humanity. That was how I knew her. And so in her death, I saw that most people who didn't agree with her during her life suddenly started to see how she was right in many things and suddenly started to agree with many things. And I think that was an irony of her work. So in 2010, there was an interview that she gave to the BBC, and the interviewer asked her, what is the one thing that you regret the most in your life? And she said, not having given enough time to my son. Oh. And I think that that really wasn't true. Because, and this was 2010, I moved back after my studies in the middle of 2008. I spent a lot of time with her after that. We really caught up with all the time that we had missed out on. And she told me about her earlier life when she got married, how she was trying to find a place for herself in her new home and in her new work life. And I can assure you neither one of them was easier than the other. But so she, I'll just give you a small story about, she was newly married and one of her in-laws had asked her to attend this typical tea party for women. And so she arrives there and she's introduced to all the women as, this is Mrs. Whatever Spinning Mills, and this is Mrs. So-and-so Banaspati, and this is, Mrs. whatever Sugar Mills. And she really just started giggling inside, and she thought that it was really absurd that, women have to be associated with their men's businesses, and, So then, I think it was about a few years ago, this is after she had received the Alternative Nobel, the Right Livelihood Award. We went to a dinner, and my father was with us, and he was introduced as Mr. Asma Jahangir. So she really got the last laugh on that one. I think, but as kids, everyone asks us, you probably were very neglected as kids because your mother was such a busybody. And I don't think that was true, because what she would do is that she would rotate us, all kids, and take us to these conferences which she would attend. So one time it was me, one time it was Munizae, one time it was Salima, and it was always rotating like that, whenever, of course, it was allowed to bring her children with her. And in June 1989, we had gone to Finland. I was about 8 at the time. And over there, you had light for most of the day, and then it would barely go dark for maybe about a few hours in the night. And I would wake up at some ghastly hour in the morning and think that it's lunchtime and start demanding keema and parathas. And, so she was, the first few days, she was like, what do I do here? And then finally she found this Indian colleague, his name was Mr. Trivedi, who was carrying spices with him. And so she got those spices from him. She conjured up some minced meat from somewhere and asked the hotel to let her use the kitchen to make me some keema. And so imagine, for an 8-year-old, I now understand how difficult that must have been, to be juggling all these things at once. But as I said, that was the level of commitment to her children, and that was the same level of commitment to her work.
I think we have to thank Munizae and Jilani for sharing their mother with all of us, sharing their wonderful home, sharing their dinner table, that your mother didn't just cook up campaigns, she actually did the cooking, and very good cooking at that.
I just want to say a few words and pay tribute to Asma's husband, Tahir Jahangir.
Yes.
In all the years that I've known her, I have never seen him object to anything she has done. He would never question that why was she going off to Baluchistan, why was she going off here and there, why was she putting her life in danger, why was she, endangering the whole family's well-being. Never was there an objection from him to stop her doing what she was doing. And I'm sure in many instances he would be frequently embarrassed by what she was doing. But he played an absolutely stoic and supportive role in that. And I don't think half the things she would have been able to do without the kind of support that he gave.
Yes. I think the gentle giant Jahangir reminds us all that, for all of our talk about the women's movement, Asma understood that the men and women together of Pakistan have to move forward together.
I just want to narrate an incident in which he was involved. In the 90s, Benazir was leader of opposition, and she was under restrictions. So she decided to move from her Islamabad residence and go to Committee Chowk on Murray Road as a gesture. And the government put wires all along and blocked all these roads and did everything. And Asma had gone to Islamabad to just witness this, as a human rights activist. But when I saw her collecting some stones, I wondered, what are these stones for? So she said, situation may arise that we have. Unfortunately, the situation did not arise because the police came and took her wagon and our companions. I think Shahzad Qadr-Bash was also there. I have a habit of escaping such situations. So So I went and I tried to find out, who was the most important man in Islamabad at that time. So it was not a man, it was a woman, Lyse Doucet.
No.
She was the BBC correspondent, and the government feared nobody except BBC.
Oh, no. A bit of an exaggeration, but...
So she said, okay. She spoke to Chaudhry Shahzad Hussain, he was the interior minister. And after some time she asked me, telephoned me, has Asma been freed? I said, no, not yet. Again spoke. Then the orders came. So when I went to the Kohsar police station to get her out, what was she doing? She was holding a class with the human rights activists. With a cigarette in her hand. And she was giving them a lecture as to how to organize these things. And we walked out, and there were some senior people, leaders, who became governors and ministers. They were just sitting without nobody was too bothering about them. So they came forward and said, we want to join Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. As regards your prize, no, the prize was there. The Courage in Journalism, the Sar Usmani Prize for Journalism, was first given to Razia Bhatti, then the second was Zabir Niazi, and the third was Mr. Ahmed Rashid. And after that, nobody.
The best of stories are the stories written in poem. And I'm going to ask Kishwar Nahid to add her poem to our gathering today. Kishwar?
दोस्तों साथियों 12 फरवरी सन 83 को भी आसमा ने मुझे कहा कि नज़्म पढ़ो। जब उसको इनाम मिला दुनिया का तो तब भी उसने कहा कोई नज़्म लिखो। उस वक्त मैंने मुनहनी औरत पे नज़्म लिखी थी और जब उसने मुझे कहा मैं जा रही हूँ तो मैंने उसे कहा आसमा आज तुम्हारे लाहौर शहर की फसील में दरार पड़ गई है। आसमा आज तुम्हारे जाने से लाहौर शहर की फसील में दरार पड़ गई है। मुफसिदो अय्यार बरबरियत के परवरदा आज तुम्हारे जाने पे बहुत खुश नजर आ रहे हैं। ये तो उस दिन भी खुश थे जब हसन नासिर फैज और भुट्टो खानदान को अल्लाह के पास भेज दिया गया था। अल्लाह मियां ने फिर देखा, फिर वही शैतान कभी मिशाल, कभी नकीब और कभी नौजवान बच्चियों को टुकड़े टुकड़े करने वालों को इज्जत बचाने की मुबारकबाद दे रहे थे। मगर अल्लाह बेइंसाफ नहीं। अमन की शहजादी आसमा तुम्हें कितनी काली हवाओं के थपेड़े लगे, कितनी जहरभरी गोलियां तुम्हारी तरफ चली, मगर तुम इसलिए बच गई कि नगर नगर सिसकते चेहरे तुम्हारी बेरिया मुस्कुराहट के इंतजार में चश्म भरा थे। तुम्हें मालूम है आसमा, कहते हैं कि रूहें आवागमन के जरिए हरकत में रहती हैं, यहां तक कि वो पाक हो जाती हैं। मगर तुम्हारी तो बेचैन मगर पाक बेरिया रूह तमाम खाक बसर लोगों के चेहरों पे खराशें सुबक नर्म रूह ताज़ा शगुफों में बदल देती थी। सब उजाड़ बस्तियों में हर रोज तुम्हारे कदमों की चाप सुन के आजुर्दा और बेनूर आंखें जगमगा उठती थी। अजीत परस्ती के सारे नाखुदा नाबूद हो जाते थे, मगर अब तुम्हारी रूह कभी क्या अक्सर चिड़िया की आवाज के साथ और सारे आलम में बादलों की गरज के साथ हमारे साथ खड़ी होगी। आसमा जाविदा।
If we could, we would ask all of you to join us on the stage, but let us see us all as as one, not divided by this river in front of us. But as we bring our session to a close, I want to ask the trustees of the Lahore Literary Festival to join us on the stage, including Iqbal Ahmed, Nair Ali Dada, Parvez Hassan, and Nushi Jamil. If you could please come and join us on the stage now.
Where is Razi?
I would request Salima, in case she's here in the audience, to kindly come to stage and receive a Lifetime Achievement Award which is being given posthumously to Asma Jahangir. And Munizae and Jilani will be accompanying Salima in case she's in the hall to receive this. Okay, great.
We asked him.
How would you like to? Great. Perfect. I'd also like to take this opportunity to announce on behalf of the trustees of the Lahore Literary Festival a Lifetime Achievement Award for the great I. Rehman Sahib. Let's go. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you.
Any of us would want to see given... Is TJ here? Oh, TJ! Oh my goodness! Please, please, please come and join us, please. Please. Oh, TJ, come.
Why?
Oh. None of us here today would ever believe, would ever have wanted to be sitting here at the Lahore Literary Festival and awarding a Lifetime Achievement Award to Asma Jahangir. Her life ended far too soon. But we want to thank all of you for joining us in what Munizae has rightfully said. It is a moment to celebrate a life lived to the fullest. And we want to thank TJ, Munizae, Salima, where did Salima go? And Jilani. Salima's still working on her mother's cases. She's so Asma-like. Please join us for sharing your family's life with all of us here. And it is fitting that Rehman Saab, who famously said, and rightfully said, I'm spending all of my life fighting for the human rights of people, and I will continue to do so. And so too to all of you here, we have now entered, as the headline in Friday Times said, to after Asma. But Asma will live on in all of us and in all of you. Thank you very much indeed.
Can I just mention that she spoke at the Pashtun sit-in, and that was her last address, because I am part of that and I just wanted to appreciate it in Islamabad.
Do you want to, is that okay? Or?
I mean, I just came up and...
Yes.
Razi?
Razi? Do you want to make a last comment?
Assalamu alaikum. I just wanted to mention, I did not personally know Asma. My name is Shandana Khan, and I was part of the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, Jirga, in Islamabad, which collected about 4,000 people. And I think very few people in this province are aware of this. Her last public address was 3 days before she passed away to our gathering there. And it was very important for us because of what she stood for. And she stood up for our rights. And as you know, after that, the killings and disappearances of the young people who started this movement have not stopped. But we are eternally grateful to her, and we make an appeal that we should have support from this province and the people of the city. Thank you.